Okay, UFC 297 just finished up, and apart from the Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis, was it a robbery or not? Who do you give the rounds to? We do need to talk about the co-main event, and I can understand straight away the title of this video is going to get some of the people that like to question Sean Strickland inappropriately at a press conference all riled up the wrong way. Even saying that they questioned Sean Strickland inappropriately is going to rile them up the wrong way. They like to get riled up. But I am not here to just trash all of women's MMA just from the onset, right? This is a very serious look at a pretty serious issue in the UFC, from ticketing pricing to pay-per-view pricing, and straight away, the way that the women's division get treated in contrast to the men's division, because the men's divisions had this same problem and they were facing the exact same consequences that I'm going to be suggesting in this video. So I'm going to try and make this as fair as possible, but the women's bantamweight division in the UFC needs to be cancelled. Where do you start with this? Well, firstly, just to draw on the contrast, in 2018, the UFC were very openly talking about cancelling the men's flyweight division because of lack of interest in that entire division. And I believe they were talking to Demetrius Johnson, who was in heavy contract negotiations with the UFC. And that's why he sort of got that one contract transfer going, because Henry Cejudo started to bring some life back into that division. But there was very serious talk in 2018 that that division would not be continuing on. So there is a precedent here for a division simply being not good enough to be UFC caliber to no longer be in the UFC. And with the departure of Ronda Rousey and just the pathetic co-main event that we saw over the weekend, I think it is time to actually start seriously having that conversation about whether or not to just look at the entire women's bantamweight division and say, there's no point of it being here. And there is no point of it being here. Look, the ticket prices for that Toronto event, the ticket prices for the Canada event, I believe it was $600 for the back row. And that's the sort of show that UFC are giving you as a co-main event for the back row. That's honestly disgusting. The streaming price, I think, is around $80. Now, my friends, look to the east. Look to the east, because at $80 a pay-per-view for that, look at that card, right? You had Neil Magny on the card. How do you say I don't want to trash Neil Magny without saying that? Neil Magny was on the pay-per-view yet again, and he had one of the most exciting performances in that last third round. I mean, if it wasn't for Arnold Allen at that first round, then Neil Magny, like, it all just, the pay-per-view was honestly horrible. Honestly horrible. Thank God there was Arnold Allen and Mozla Evloev at the start and Dricus and Sean at the end, because everything in the middle was just sort of, what are we doing here? How is this worth $80? How is this worth $600 at the back row? It's not. Look at the performance over the weekend. First, you have Mayra Bueno Silva, which saved the co-main event in the press conference because she actually gave us something to get interested in. But then when you actually go ahead and look at her performance in the cage, like, is that really the number one contender in that entire division? Really? Now, I know you're going to say, oh, Juliana Pena is the real number one contender in that division, but Juliana Pena, in her last fight, pretty much got 10-7'd every single round. Like, okay, so it's not Mayra Bueno Silva, who is on her back, not trying when she's clearly losing a fight at her, what is going to be her one shot at a title. We talk a lot in this channel about the fight in the fighter, and there is nothing I hate more than a quitter. Nothing. And that was a quitter's performance. That's horrible from a number one contender. And then the argument is, well, she's not really the number one contender. Well, the number one contender is someone who is not good in her division. And this is the problem. You've got a division that has just been left talentless? Where is the excitement coming from? What is the point of going on here? It feels like Raquel Pennington won the title by merely being around, by outweighting everybody else. I mean, Holly Holm is still in this division. Her best highlights are from before the Reebok deal. Misha Tate is still in this division. Again, her best highlights are from before the Reebok deal. I truly believe that you could take Ronda Rousey out of the WWE, drop her back in the division, and she would be a champion today, which means there has been no growth in that division since 2016, nearly 10 years. I know I'm using a bit of hyperbole here when I talk about Juliana Peña's, decision in her last fight against Amanda Nunes, Juliana Peña's scorecard in her last fight with Amanda Nunes, but it really was that bad of a performance. And honestly, where is the growth in this division? So to have so much pressure being put on the men's division at flyweight in 2018, for them to be at the state that they're at in women's bantamweight at the start of 2024, and to not have any of these questions drawn towards them, no. It is time for the community to start speaking up. And we have two great women's divisions that deserve to be in the UFC. They should still be there, but I mean, again, they seem to be propped up, and especially women's bantamweight, it seems to be propped up because of the message. And we know what the message is. And okay, fine. Have them there. Have them in the UFC. Like, put them on cards in front of us. But is there not a better way that we can start to manage what is going on here in women's MMA? I mean, we are going to have certain cards during the year that are going to be on ABC. There are going to be certain fight nights out of the Apex that could use some propping up. And these are really the perfect sort of events and fight nights where you can put a title fight on the line, where ABC, fight night, lots of eyes on it, put a title fight on the line. Put Weili Zhang on that, put Carla Esparza on that. That is to give the regular TV audience and say, look, I mean, if these are real championship UFC fights, then put them on fight night and treat the audience with real championship UFC fights. At least you can keep the excitement in those divisions going that way, because sometimes they do have wars and interesting fights. But at women's bantamweight, there is just nothing to look forward to at all. It is a waste of money and an event killer. It's not even worth filling in an event with someone like a Neil Magny, who is just there so Mike Malott can go and get an easy win. And all the Canadian fans can cheer and we can all pretend it was a great night for Canada. That is what Neil Magny is there for. That's what they did with Ian Gary in Boston. They put Neil Magny there so you can beat him. And that's the sort of pay-per-view that you're giving us. That is a prelim fight right there. That's a prelim event, not a pay-per-view event. And the whole pay-per-view this weekend seemed to just feel like that. And then they gave us that co-main event, and that co-main event performed in that manner. No, not good. So the big question is, what do you do going forward with that division? Do you scrap it completely? And what do you do with women's MMA in general? Because unfortunately, performances like that, they start to add up, and there is already such a large growing voice of people that no longer want to see women's MMA on the UFC cards. And they really do need to do something to start propping that up and helping that audience along, or give them reasons to want to watch it. And I really do believe that putting women's flyweight and women's strawweight on UFC fight nights as main events, I mean, you're only talking about 4 or 6 fight nights a year that would get used up in that way. I do think it helps prop them up and make them feel a little bit more special, rather than throwing them on UFC pay-per-views, $80 pay-per-views, and getting dud fight after dud fight after dud fight. And you're just going to start growing this hatred within the community even more that is already there. And no one wants to see that. No one wants to see that grow. You want to try and build these divisions up to make them more interesting and more enjoyable for us to consume. I just don't see how bantamweight fits into that equation. I think it is time to cancel the entire division. Anyway, they're just my thoughts on what to do about the division after this weekend's horrible co-main event. Might be a bit harsh. You let me know down there in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, why don't you go ahead and hit that subscribe button? It means so much to small creators like myself. And of course, I'll see you all in the next one.